ladies and gentlemen, it's so nice to have you here. Thank you for joining us. And on behalf of the Noordwes-Universiteit, we hope you have a splendid afternoon with us. It's afternoon if you're watching live. If you're watching later, well, just hello. Today we're going to focus on academic mentoring. And we have a very nice program set up for you with quite a number of experts touching on this. So we'd like you to participate right from the get-go. Let me invite you to engage with us. You're watching this on YouTube, so just sign in and post a question. We are checking the questions, and if at any time you feel you want to say something or mention something or ask a question to our experts, you're more than welcome to do so. So we're focusing on the Noordwes-Universiteit, specifically the Faculty of Humanities and the research unit Optentia. They've developed something beautiful, and that's what we're going to focus on this afternoon. But to officially welcome you here this afternoon, I'm going to ask the Executive Dean of the Faculty of Humanities to welcome you, Professor nwu-pukke. Professor, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. I should first apologize for not being there in person at the Poch campus because I took the student protests perhaps too seriously, because I hear there's peace and quiet on the campus after all. But I'm greatly honored and excited at the same time to welcome you to the launch of our short courses on academic mentoring, which are perhaps the first of their kind in this part of the world. And I want to give a special welcome to our invited guests who will be introduced shortly, and also everyone that is participating online. So we have been discussing in the Faculty of Humanities the need for a mentorship program that can help guide our young academics and accelerate our staff development. This is precisely because we are quite a young faculty, in a sense, with about 47 of our staff who are still in junior lecturer and lecturer levels. And we realized that we could easily assign senior academics to mentor the young and upcoming scholars, but it was evident that we were making perhaps too many assumptions. For instance, that our senior academics are well experienced and hence prepared to guide young ones in their career journey. Of course, there's that natural or organic mentorship that can take place. We also assume that young academics themselves understand and appreciate the role and purpose of mentorship. So both these assumptions are obviously not entirely correct because not all senior academics have a good sense of what the mentorship program is all about, because most have not been exposed to any formal mentorship of any kind. And similarly, not all young academics know what to expect from a mentor-mentee relationship. So without this understanding, it is clear that this relationship cannot yield the optimum results that we expect. And of course, anything wrong can happen, resulting in frustration on both sides. So the mentorship program designed by Optentia addresses precisely that by targeting the mentor and mentee separately before they enter into a relationship. The courses provide the necessary theoretical and practical guidelines that will enable an enriching and fulfilling mentorship relationship. When I was looking at mentorship on the internet earlier today, I stumbled upon some fascinating statistics which I thought I should share with you. So according to a Wall Street Journal article, 70% of Fortune 500 companies have a mentorship program, pointing to the fact that perhaps successful companies prioritize mentorship as a driver for growth. Secondly, it shows that mentees get promoted 5 times more often than those who are not in a mentoring program. Retention rates for staff are significantly higher for those participating in a mentorship program. For mentees, it's about 22%, and for mentors by about 20%. Employees participating in a mentoring program are more likely also to get a salary increment than those not participating, according to that survey. So I'm very confident and excited that these learning programs will be a game changer for us, and indeed for anyone who chooses to take advantage of them. So I want to take this opportunity to thank Professor Ian Rothman and his team in Optentia for developing these world-class short learning programs, which will undoubtedly benefit not only academics in our faculty, but across the Northwest University, other universities nationally and beyond. So welcome everyone once again, and I hope you will enjoy the engagements this afternoon and take advantage of our short learning programs. Thank you very much, and all the very best.
Professor Moyo, thank you for your contribution and starting us off today, as one would expect from the Executive Dean, Faculty of Humanities. You have set the scene. Thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you know now what we're talking about, and we are going to talk about it for a while, because we're going to first start a bit of a broader perspective on mentoring in the academic environment. And for this, we have a whole set of experts available. And then a second set of experts will be stepping up to the plate to bat and say, listen, this is what we've developed from Optentia's side, specifically when it comes to the short learning programs. Again, if you have any questions, you're more than welcome to post them at any time. Now, when you visit the website of Optentia, you'll see that it's a very interesting research unit at the Northwest University. I've always been pleasantly surprised by their multidisciplinary approach to themes, transdisciplinary approaches they also have, and really a few fascinating qualifications that they have on the table. They are situated in our Faculty of Humanities, but they also work quite closely with our Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences. With that in mind, it is a huge honor for me to welcome Professor Lucius Botha, who is the Research Director in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the Northwest University. Now, Prof. Lucius will introduce us into this first part of what we have here on offer you this afternoon. Professor, we are in your hands, and thank you for availing yourself to be here with us.
Thank you so much, GP. It's a privilege, and thanks for the opportunity. From my side, I would like to introduce to you the three invited or keynote speakers, and then without further ado, they will continue. We will give each one of them like 7 minutes to share with us what they want to share with us. So the first keynote will be Professor Malebogo nwu-pukke. She is currently an associate professor in the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of Cape Town. She is the director of the Center for Research and Computational and Applied Mechanics at UCT. Her research focuses on biomechanics, particularly in computational and experimental studies of thrombosis, congenital heart disease, neo-heart attack therapies, and curly human scalp hair. She was also selected in the first cohort of Ilse Lomzo Fellows at the Stellenbosch Institute of Advanced Studies. So she will be our first presenter. Our second presenter will be Professor Irma Elof, who is an educational psychologist at the University of Pretoria. She's also a registered educational psychologist and a member of ASAF, the Academy of Science of South Africa. She's the former Dean of Education at the University of Pretoria and was the first woman to hold this position. In 2018, she was also awarded a Förderkreis 6069 scholarship at the Institute for Teacher Training and School Research of the University of Innsbruck. She has authored more than 100 scholarly articles and book chapters and several other edited publications. Irma is an alumnus of several universities like Pretoria, Stellenbosch, and Northwest, also the Gibbs Business School. and she is currently the adjunct professor at the University of Innsbruck, Austria, and her research focuses on well-being, quality education, and sustainability. And then the third speaker is Professor Norman Duncan, who holds a professorship in psychology and is also the former DVC for academic of the University of Pretoria. His scholarly interests are primarily in authorship development, racism, and social and community psychology. He has also co-edited numerous volumes and books, including the book Race, Memory, and the Apartheid Archive that appeared from Palgrave. He is a former president of the Psychological Society of South Africa, SAISA, and is an alumnus of the University of the Western Cape, the Université Paul Valéry, and the University Bordeaux-Montaigne in France. Professor Duncan has recently been appointed also as the next editor-in-chief of the South African Journal of Psychology, the SAJP, a position he also had previously held. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's really my privilege to then ask Professor Malebogo to go first, and the title of her 7-minute input will be Mentorship in Unexpected Places. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Wittus. It's a real honor and privilege to be here this afternoon. And I've titled my contribution Mentorship in Unexpected Places because much of my experience of mentoring and being mentored has been in interdisciplinary spaces. Initially as an engineer working on medical problems, which I continue to do, and more recently, I've had a desire to understand what happens in my first year classroom. So I've been partnering with education specialists and meeting with them every Monday for the last 4 years to get a better understanding. And why I say that is that I've not always been mentored or mentored by people in my own discipline, nor has it always been with people whose careers are at a very different stage to my own. So in saying that, one needs to hold an openness to learning and recognize that learning can happen in very many different spaces. So some of what I will say will apply more to mentees, and the rest will apply more to mentors. So in some instances, one won't have the luxury of necessarily choosing who your mentor or mentee would be, but it would be worthwhile to give a fair amount of thought to what you would want that relationship to yield, which could help you go about identifying the right person. And it may be someone in your discipline whose work or way of working you admire, or it may be someone completely outside of your discipline who has a specific skill set or approach that you know you require for the next stage of your career. And I would say go ahead and cold contact people. You may get lots of rejections, but one of the best mentoring and mentor-mentee relationships I've seen have arisen from cold contact. So it's worthwhile to persist, because when it does work, it can work so well. And of course, converse to that, one would need to be open to being cold contacted. And of course, one could also ask for introductions from people in your informal networks. So you could speak to your friends who work in spaces that you're interested in entering, or you could ask for people for recommendations of people who they know have had good experience with mentoring. And then you could also approach formal networks or groups. So if you're at a conference and there's someone whose work you really like, you could approach them, or there's a younger colleague who you would like to mentor based on recognizing perhaps a commonality of approach or commonality with something you may have experienced in the past. That is something you may want to strike up. And once you've identified that person, it's fairly important to think carefully about the alignment of career stage as well as values. And what I mean by that is there may be great benefit with partnering with someone who's in a very different career stage to you. So if you're a mentee, that's someone who's walked the road much longer than you have, because of course then you can lean on their years of wisdom and experience. And a very practical example is I remember having a challenging time with colleagues, and I could contact a mentor, sketch the situation out to them, and they then were able to give me advice on how to assert myself in that situation without necessarily burning professional bridges, which is a really important skill set to be able to develop. They may also just have a better balance between an openness to new ideas while still being very pragmatic about productivity. So they may say to you, absolutely have your blue skies ideas, go and chase them, but also don't look down on the low-hanging fruit, which will mean that you're actually able to build up your career quite quickly. In other instances, it may be helpful to have peer-to-peer mentorship. So someone who's in a similar career stage as you, because they'll have much more recent experience of the joys and the pains which you'll experience at your particular career stage. And in the very best examples, it may also be potential for setting up long-term professional relationships, which may mean that you can seek, for example, resources together and build up alongside each other. For the mentor, there's always benefits to having a mentee, of course, which is that often younger colleagues can be at the cutting edge, and so they may have new ideas and ways of thinking and time to really explore those new ideas. And in addition to that, it may be that I've seen this with some of my students, with all the technological advancements that are happening, they tend to be better early adopters of technology. So as you speak to younger mentees, they may actually also help you along your own journey with adapting to some of the new things that are coming up. The second idea, in addition to career stage, is the question of values. And again, this could be a luxury because you may not always have a choice as to who your mentor or your mentee is going to be. But in instances when you do, it may be helpful to find someone who has a similar commitment to the emergence of new ideas and directions. So, for example, if you're equally open to the emergence or equally closed off to the emergence of new ideas, it may be that that relationship can be struck off in a much easier way. If you are very open to the emergence of new ideas and directions, you'd need to be able to trust yourselves to roll with whatever emerges, and you'd be very open to learning together and to a journey of discovery together. Similarly, it would be important to both have a commitment to fair partnerships, which would contribute to the growth of the mentor and the mentee, because both people will bring something to the party. Typically, the mentor is further along the journey and is better versed with the signposts, so they can draw on their wealth of experience to gently guide the mentee. The mentee, however, has their own unique set of circumstances that they bring as well. And one of the gifts that you can give to a mentor is to continually give them feedback and check in with them. So, for example, just let them know how things are going and let them know how a certain piece of advice has helped you along the way, or how you tweaked what they said and what results that has yielded. And that also helps the mentor in developing along their own mentoring journey. So in closing, this mentor-mentee relationship will depend on how much time and effort you put into it, and it can be a very rewarding partnership. I can attest to that in my own life. However, sometimes, despite the best intentions, things don't always work out as they should. In my mind, that shouldn't be a reason for giving up on seeking out those kinds of partnerships, because often the benefits far outweigh the challenges. And at the end of the day, there's always room to learn something from each other, and whether the relationship lasts for a season or over an entire career, a slightly optimistic outlook can help you to see the good that the other has to offer.
Thank you so much, Professor, and also for keeping to the time so diligently. And we will get to the discussions later after we had all the inputs. The next one will be Prof. Irma Elof with a title, a nice Shakespearean title, To Thine Own Self Be True. Prof. Irma, over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor Boertes, and thank you very much to the Faculty of Humanities at Northwest University and the Optentia Group for this opportunity to speak about something that is very close to my heart. I'm very heartened by the fact that this is gaining more attention in academic circles, because often it tended to fall by the wayside in terms of where our attention goes in the academic world, and we often found that mentorship was more on the periphery of what we do on a daily basis. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Like Professor Malibogu, I will speak a little bit from personal experience, both as a mentee and a mentor, about this space where often I have been so surprised, where my expectations have been turned upside down, where what I thought something would be or what mentorship would be was turned out to be quite the opposite, and in many delightful ways. So my first recommendation would be for anyone working in this space to be prepared to be surprised, and to also know that what works for one person may not necessarily work for another person. So I'm going to be sharing three or four ideas of the places where I have been surprised and where my initial perception about what academic mentorship entails was completely turned around by my own personal experiences. Some of it I will be sharing some anecdotes and personal experiences. So the first one is around the question of who do you mentor? So Professor Malibogo has shared so wisely the fact that it crosses disciplinary boundaries. So when I was coming back from my sabbatical time, after having served 2 terms as dean some time ago, I thought that this would be one space where I would be able to make a contribution in terms of mentoring young academics who's coming up through the ranks. And on the way back from my last position in my sabbatical, I made a little list of people that I thought would really be appreciative of my mentorship. And I came back to Pretoria and I invited them for coffee, and for some of them I invited them for lunch. It was really lovely lunches and coffees, but nothing happened with some of them afterwards. It was more like a once-off. But in the meantime, I was getting WhatsApp messages and emails and people popping into my office, people stopping me in the corridor and asking me questions as wide-ranging as how do they strengthen their international networks, or where can they apply for funding for a postdoc, or how should they be interpreting this particular email that's just been sent out by the executive of the university to the whole university. They didn't quite know what to make of that. And in the beginning, I actually didn't pay attention to this as much. I just did it and it responded. But in the end, some of the strongest mentor-mentee relationships that I still have to this day, 7, 8 years later, has come from those almost inadvertent contacts that came my way as a mentor. So I think that openness is really needed, both on the side of the mentor as well as the mentees, on who you end up having as a mentor or who you end up mentoring may be completely up to chance and not necessarily as you expected or planned by design. So that would be my first thought that I would just like to share in terms of where I was surprised. The second one links up a little bit with that, and that has to do with the differences between formal and informal mentorship programs. Because I think both are very, very important. And I'm very happy about this program, for instance, in terms of formal mentorship. I also like the fact that formal mentorship programs is often tied to outcomes. I have a cautionary note there, though, because I often think that we want the outcomes to be much quicker in the formal mentorship programs. And as it goes in academic life, the outcomes and the benefits of academic mentorship often comes many, many years later when people are promoted or they win the big funding opportunities. So there's a space for both formal and informal mentorship. I would like to share, though, my own experience that much of what happens in the mentorship space happens in the informal environment. It's the reason why we should have tea rooms where academics and people working in academia can have a cup of tea together. It's the reason why we should have shared photocopying machines, because often when we meet each other there, or we stand in line at the cafeteria on Groenkloof campus to wait for our coffee, that's where some of our most significant conversations take place. Certainly when I was still a mentee, some of my most profound conversations took place on the stairs in the Opvoedkunderegsgeleerdheid gebou on the Hatfield campus of the University of Pretoria when people were running past one another. So that's the second one, is the differences between formal and informal mentorship programs. My third comment that I would like to make, where I was completely surprised. So here I am, moving into the world of being more of a mentor than a mentee, was to ask the question, who is learning from whom? Because I can honestly tell you, there were many days where I was thinking, oh my goodness, I'm learning more from these young academics than anything that I can impart from my years of experience in academia. They were telling me about fantastic voice-to-text apps that could transcribe interviews. They were dealing with rejections from journals much more productively than me. I don't know if it is because I'm a Generation Xer, but I totally fret when I get rejections from journals. Whereas with these young millennials, which is a generation that's, millennials are now in their early 30s already. They're not the younger ones. For that, we have Generation Z and now the new Generation Alpha. But with the millennials, one of the things that I so admire about them is their solution-focused approach. And they just don't get down by the phenomenon of failure. If they get a rejection, they just think of the next solution and how they're going to deal with that. So there were many spaces where I was in conversation with what someone might assume might be a mentee, but I was actually the one that was learning. So that flat structure in terms of academic mentorship is something that really resonates with me. That it's not, we often assume a hierarchy when we talk about mentorship, but I think the flat structure and the democratic way in which we learn from one another is an important aspect of what we know today. And then the fourth comment that I would like to make is the fact that when I was younger, I used to think that you would have like a mentor, someone that you look up to. And what I've since come to learn is that we have multiple sources of mentorship across multiple domains in our lives. And that certainly in my own life and what I've witnessed in other young academics or in young academics is that they can go to many different mentors to learn about various themes of academic life, which is very complex, as we all know. So I've titled this contribution to thine own self be true, which is, some of you may know, it's a scene from Hamlet written by Shakespeare in Act 1, Scene 3, where Polonius, who's the chief minister of King Claudius, is advising his son and blessing his son as he ventures towards university. So he's trying to impart some knowledge and wisdom to his son to deal with university life. And in that speech, Polonius says this line, to thine own self be true. But hidden in that same speech, there's also two other quotations that I would just like to lift out for today's conversation. And the one is, to give every man thy ear, but few thy voice. And I think this is very applicable to the conversation around academic mentorship that we are having today, because listening more has certainly for me been extremely valuable, whether it was as a mentee or as a mentor. Is if you listen more than wanting to impart what you are agitating to say, I really think you learn more. And then the second quote from that same speech of Polonius was, neither a borrower nor a lender be. Now, I'm quite sure Polonius was talking to his son in the way that he will be spending money and lending money while at university, which still holds true in today's university life. But I would like to give another perspective to that, and that is coming back to the title of my contribution, to thine own self be true. I think it is one of the privileges of working in academic life is to completely be your own original self. And that is something that I would advocate for. We have the privilege to work in a space where you can be an original and not borrow from someone else, so that you can be the one that is needed in academia, whether it's in health sciences or education or law or engineering, whatever your scientific field, be an original, and to thine own self be true. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Irma. Then our last speaker is Prof. Norman Duncan, and he has put the title of his input, Mentoring in an Era of Rapid and Unpredictable Change. Over to you, Prof. Norman.
Apologies, I'm going to try and share my screen quickly. I hope you can see it.
All good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Firstly, it is really a pleasure for me to participate in this panel discussion. And I would therefore like to thank Professor Rothman and the rest of the Optentia team for having invited me to participate. As in the case with Professor Elof, I mean, mentoring is something that is really close to my heart. I think it's very important in contemporary academia for a range of reasons. Like Professor Elof, I'd also like to start off, and like Professor Malbochwe, start off, I suppose, with one or two personal reflections. When I started out in academia, of course, I mean, there was no such thing as formal mentors. Our mentoring was much more dispersed than is the case today, and is the case that will be the case with the project that Optentia is starting. When I started out, of course, I mean, in academia, in the Department of Psychology at the University of the Western Cape, long time ago, the department was very small. And so all senior academics took it upon themselves to advise the younger academics around matters pertaining to their career, how to supervise, how to lecture, etc. And of course, all of them could really take care of the younger or the earliest career academics, because there were very few of us at that stage. Of course, in contemporary society, I mean, and when one looks at universities today, one realizes that the situation has changed dramatically. Universities are so much more complex, and university expects so much more of early career academics than had been the case when I started out. And it's for this reason that I think that more and more universities are realizing that it's important to establish formal mentoring programs. So hats off to Northwest University and particularly to Optentia for initiating this process. I think it is vitally important. As Professor Malabokwe and Prof. Moyo had indicated, very frequently universities start these mentoring programs without quite knowing what mentoring entails, what is expected of the mentor and what is expected of the mentee. So I do think it's a very good idea for the university, for Northwest University to have started these modules. Now, just to give you some background about where I'm speaking from, what is my experience in terms, what are my experiences in terms of mentoring? Well, until 2022, and that's not 20,222, that was a typing error. I had initiated I initiated one important mentoring project while I was at the University of Pretoria. The one related the one was a mentoring project as part of a work readiness program for final year students, and they found that process very, very useful. And in fact, the impact of the mentoring was very evident the minute they entered the workspace. They declared themselves much more ready to grapple with the intricacies of the workspace. And according to their supervisors, they were better able, in fact, to navigate the workspace than students who had not participated in the mentoring program. I also had, as part of my responsibilities as Vice Principal Academic at the University of Pretoria, I had to oversee UP's NGAP program. Very exciting program. I think it's one of the more successful DHET programs if one looks at the outcomes. In any case, in my discussions with the NGAP participants, the NGAP lecturers, what most of and all of them, I must acknowledge, were relatively successful. I mean, they went through the different career stages quite seamlessly. And when I asked them, I mean, what do you attribute to success to? Having completed a PhD in time, doing well in terms of teaching, and all of them said that it was while they valued the financial support given by the program, their mentors made the big difference for them. And it's at that stage that I realized that mentoring is going to be the deal maker or deal breaker in contemporary academia. Currently, I have the privilege of mentoring a number of early career academics in the Faculty of Humanities at Wits University. I was appointed as visiting professor at Wits, and they asked me to undertake this project as one of my key deliverables. And I must say, as Professor Elof had indicated, that it's always a pleasure to engage with young academics at the beginning of their careers, because then the world is an oyster. Everything, everything is still to be achieved, and it's a period of great excitement for young people. And as mentors, we can share in that excitement. Now, I've been involved, I suppose, in mentoring in a formal way and an informal way for many years. And I suppose the question that one can ask oneself is, what informs my way of mentoring? What informs my engagement with mentees? Before I get there, I've got two principles, which I just thought of last night as a way of starting the discussion or continuing the discussion. Before I get there, however, perhaps I must reiterate or reprise a comment made by Professor Elof, and that is that we are all mentors in informal ways very frequently as senior academics. We may not realize it, but others look up to us. And so I suppose it's advisable for us always to be attentive to that fact, and to always offer whatever support one can to academics entering the workspace for the first time, or early career academics. I was recently, and I suppose this is related to my own career trajectory. I'd retired last year, and since I'd retired, I'd received a number of messages from people who wanted to tell me that what I had done at one point or the other in their careers had really made an impact on their careers. I recently received such a comment from an academic who had established herself in Australia. Of course, the people on whose careers you did not have a very positive impact, they won't be writing to you. But I suppose the moral of the story at this point is one should, of course, be cognizant of the fact that even if you don't fulfill a formal mentoring role, other beginning career or early career academics will always look up to established academics, and therefore we should always be cognizant of the fact that we are offering ways of engaging in academia, and that we should, when we offer I suppose examples of being in academia, that we should look at how we can positively impact other people's lives. Now, the two principles underlying the way in which I engage with beginning early career academics would firstly be to take cognizance of the fact that the mentee is responsible for her own career or his own career. My role would be to serve as advisor, to show people which way to people who can offer the expertise which frequently I might not have, because that's the reality of contemporary academia. When I started out in academia, the world was very small. Senior academics could know most of what was required, but academia has diversified to such an extent that we mentors cannot possibly know everything that can assist early career academics. So one should know when to guide people or to show them to people who have the expertise, people who can help you in roles or in areas where you can't help them. The second point, of course, is, and this is pertinent for contemporary academia, is that the world is changing at such a rapid rate, including academia. Academia is changing very, very rapidly. So what had applied 10 years ago may not necessarily apply today, and mentors should be cognizant of that, and mentees as well. The lesson that I obviously therefore share with the people that I mentor is that one should be prepared to learn, and to learn rapidly, and when necessary to unlearn. And I think all the established academics on this platform would realize the truth of this, that sometimes what had been very useful 10 years ago absolutely would be useless today, and in fact counterproductive, and one has to unlearn that and then to relearn new ways of engaging in your work in academia. I thought that I'd shared this quote with you. It's an often quoted passage from a book written by Alvin Toffler, the US futurist, and it says that tomorrow's illiterate will not be those who can't read, it will be those who have not learned how to learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I suppose, I mean, this is one of the messages that I try to bring home to the people that I have the privilege of mentoring, is the level to which the world is in flux, and the importance, therefore, of constantly having to adjust and to adapt to your world if you wish to make a success of whatever you are doing. Now, this obviously points to another fundamental principle that I utilize quite frequently, and that is the notion of the growth mindset. If one is going to encourage people to learn, then obviously they need to believe that it is possible for them to learn. I mean, they have to believe fundamentally in the plasticity of the human brain, and so therefore I rely quite a bit then on the notion of the growth mindset. Other important principles that one would obviously want to impart are issues of creative thinking, critical thinking, creativity, and cognitive flexibility, which is so important in contemporary society. Now, instead of speaking about the benefits of mentoring for mentees, because I think that's self-evident, and Prof. Malebogo and Prof. Elof had spoken about this, I just briefly want to recap what the benefits of mentoring are for the mentor. In the first instance, obviously, mentors have the opportunity to gain exposure to new perspectives of early career academics. Professor Elof spoke about this quite compellingly. Very frequently, young academics can expose you to ideas that you had not yet caught on with, or that had not come to your attention yet. They read different stuff. They've been exposed to a world fundamentally different to the world that senior academics have been exposed to, and there should therefore be an openness to learn from them. Coincidentally, because I'm passionate about this area and I've worked in it for a considerable period of time, I just want to debunk the notion that very frequently it's the young academics who are the early adopters. In my own experience, very frequently, older academics or senior academics are the early adopters of technology as well. And very frequently, one has to teach younger people the value of technology. So, I mean, this is just as an aside. The assumption should not necessarily be that older people are averse to technology or the adjustment required to adopt technology. Otherwise, one would not have a very long life in academia if you are averse to making use of the benefits of technology. The second benefit, obviously, is that through interacting with mentees, mentors have the opportunity to reflect on their own careers. Now, our world and our lives are so fast-paced, and particularly in academia, we hardly have the time to sit back and reflect on our careers, what we have done, how we have done it, what had been successful, what had been less successful. And it's only, and I find this in my case, it's only in engaging with mentees that I reflect very frequently on my own career. And that's an important career phase for anyone to go through in order to see what had been valuable and what had been less valuable. And of course, we will share that in the mentoring space. Through the third point is through mentoring, mentors are afforded the opportunity to further strengthen their leadership styles and their mentoring styles. So each time one mentors, one learns something new that one can then carry into a new mentoring relationship. And then finally, being given the opportunity to mentor serves, and I believe that this is very important, it serves as a very compelling affirmation of the mentor's experience and expertise. Very frequently, academics believe that their job is a thankless job. No one really notices what they do, and that frequently is the case. But when one gets asked to be a mentor, one realizes, hey, someone thinks that my experience counts for something. They would want to learn from me. And I think that there can be no better, other than, of course, achieving your full professorship, obtaining your PhD, there can be no better achievement than being called upon by a beginning or early career academic to be asked to be that person's mentor. Colleagues, and Lucius, I hope I've kept to the timelines, but thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Prof. Norman. You are a bit over, but we will forgive you for that. Colleagues, I'm going to, from what you've contributed, maybe just share 2 or 3 things and like your responses on that. I think both of you, or all of you, actually refer to the importance of peer-to-peer mentoring. So I would very much like to hear in your own life, in your own lived experience, to what extent have you experienced peer-to-peer mentoring? And yeah, you can be quite vivid in your examples. So anyone that wants to go, you want to go maybe first, Prof?
I'm happy to go first. I've had quite a lot of experience of peer-to-peer mentoring. If I think of two of my closest collaborators at the moment, that's probably the most crystal example of peer-to-peer mentoring that I have. In the first instance, we've come from slightly different points of view, but the other colleague is just a far better fundraiser than I could ever be. So I sit with them and I watch how they navigate and negotiate new funding opportunities, and how they've even brought on some of our students who we co-supervise together to learn how to raise funds. So something like that has been a real education for me, because that's not a strong point of mine. In another instance, there's a colleague who supervises students in a slightly different way to how I would do it. So I've just said, let's co-supervise all our students together, because I just love watching how they supervise. Again, that's been an education to me. And so those are, for me, concrete examples of peer-to-peer mentoring, which have really enriched my own practice.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prof. Malebogo. And it's two concrete examples in terms of supervision and in terms of fundraising, because we know most academics are good in actually the research part of their work and even disseminating the knowledge. But when it gets to grant making, we're not that skilled in terms of how do you land the big bucks. But thank you for those two concrete examples. Prof. Irma, Prof. Duncan, maybe you want to add to your own lived experience?
Yes, gladly. I think one of the things that is really valuable within peer-to-peer mentoring is what we learn from our failures. You know, in academia, we tend to share our lessons on all our successes. That's, you talk about the things that's worked out. But in a safe space of peer-to-peer mentoring, we can also share where things didn't really go well, and we can learn from one another. And we can also learn from one another's mistakes. So certainly throughout my career, that has been a very, very valuable source of information and support.
Thank you, Prof. Norman.
It's one example from my side. It's been primarily in the field of writing. One learns a lot if you co-write articles, particularly at the early stages of a career, and also when you're more senior academic. There's so much to learn from co-authors. And if you pair yourself with a younger author or early career author, there's a lot to learn on both sides.
Thank you for that. I must confess that my first article that I personally sent away, the editor responded, "You can't be serious." And I then didn't have a mentor in those, no one offering me tissues to deal with that. So I think we've heard about co-authorship, we've heard about experiences around fundraising, so that is important. The other thing that I've picked up from what you presented is this notion of intergenerational learning. That often, the mentors, because maybe they are more wise, they have a longer lived experience, but then also from the mentor side, they can learn a lot from the mentee. So maybe if you can share with us a few examples when you were a mentee, how you felt that your mentors have learned from you. I'd like to hear some of your anecdotes and stories. Anyone that wants to go first.
Okay, I suppose I can go with the publishing article or article publications once again. Very frequently when I work with senior people, at least as a young academic, I worked with senior people. There was a lot I could learn from them, but sometimes I had perspectives that they did not have, and which I'm sure they benefited from because the articles were published eventually.
Thank you. Anyone else? Prof. Irma?
I can perhaps share this anecdote. I was co-supervising a doctoral student with someone in our speech pathology department, and this doctoral student was coming with this new idea. She said, "This has never been done. I'm going to do it this way." And I was so excited with the student. And then the more experienced supervisor Professor Brenda Lowe, she said, you know what, we did this 20 years ago already. It's been tried, it's been tested, and there are reasons why it didn't work out. So that intergenerational learning, you know, not to make the same mistakes again, has been very valuable for me.
I think about it in terms of publication, probably because I just didn't realize what stakes were up against me. But the first paper I published, I really struggled to publish. It took about 4 years. And then in the end, a very surprising journal accepted the work, which was a big shock. So when I started with my colleagues on this work of trying to better understand our first-year students, because I've seen that, you know, sometimes the journals you don't expect to publish your work will, I said to my colleagues, well, let's throw it into this and this journal, and they said, we will never get published there. And I thought, well, you never know, let's just take a shot. The worst thing that'll happen is they'll say, don't bring this work here again. And to our pleasant surprise, it was published there, obviously after extensive revisions, but I think it's a case in which I was working with older colleagues who knew the boundaries of the discipline so well, and because of my naivety, I just sort of said, well, let's just throw it there and see. And that, I think, also helped our dynamic as we move forward.
Wonderful to be a young Turk and actually let's test the system. I also want to ask you a question on the notion of horizontal learning in unexpected places, and touching onto what Prof. Irma said, in an informal way, you know, having the cup of coffee at a conference. Recently I came from a conference in Australia where I tried to make it the point that every lunchtime or tea time I link up with someone that I didn't know a lot about, but I love the work that I've read and I've seen, and make the best, just asking them, share your story with me. So I'd like to hear from you, how can we actually maximize on the informal spaces and the unexpected places coming to us? Be it a mentee or be it a mentor.
I can perhaps just comment here. I think in the current push that we have for more flexible working hours, which is an important initiative, I think, but I think it's going to be much more important to create those spaces where people can just be together, because we may lose this if we have flexible working hours to the extent that no one is ever at the office at the same time. So creating spaces for socialization, just to be together. Sometimes at conferences, I think if we just put out a very, very good coffee and we leave everyone in the same room, there will be much more productive discussions than when we have a formal agenda. So I think prioritizing that will be important going forward.
Could I probe you on that while giving the others a chance to think of their examples? But I mean, we're living now in the post-pandemic, post-COVID, and we know a bit what it has done to our social capital, to our networks of trust and being Homo sapiens. Is it now more difficult to be a mentor or a mentee, or to actually fill these spaces, to reach out to each other, than what it was pre-COVID?
If I may. I think it's actually easier now, because pre-COVID, the expectation would have been that I would have met someone in person, in situ. At the moment, I'm mentoring, when I'm not at WITS, I'm mentoring people online, and that I find very, very useful. I think one of the I agree fully with what Irma had said, but one of the unexpected benefits of I suppose, more flexible working hours, that it has forced people to start rebalancing their lives. Unfortunately, pre-COVID, I mean, most of our lives were consumed with only work, and largely work. And during the COVID period, we realized that we need to start looking at other important elements of our work. And that's a very important aspect that one has to cover in mentoring, the work-life balance.
Mm-hmm. Prof. Norman, I also want to pick on something that you said, to your whole notion of learn, unlearn, and relearn. And I think Prof. Irma has also referred to the importance of listening skills to become a good mentor and a mentee. So, and it's often in these spaces of silence and meditation almost that you get some of the answers. And I know in my field as a development sociologist, development economist, there's a big drift towards this notion of unlearning and relearning as well in many contexts. So I'd like you to talk a little bit to that about in terms of how can we enhance our ability to look better, to listen better, and not to be so quick with advice. As academics, sometimes we suffer of verbal diarrhea, and we like to immediately jump in and give something. So how do we inculcate that sort of attitude and culture to listen more? Anyone that wants to respond to that?
I suppose, if I may, it's something that we will progressively have to build into our curricula. It's a whole new generation that have been taught in ways that's fundamentally different to the ways in which we were taught. Let's face it, when I started out in academia, most of the truths were there to remain for a few years. Now the truths get overturned virtually overnight, and it's that ability to understand how things are in flux and how flexible things are, and to work with that. Mm-hmm. That the new generation of students have to learn, and we have to learn it alongside them. One of the things that really killed me. I moved from one to a number of universities during my career, and one of the things that killed me was always when you come with a new idea, people tell you, no, it won't work in this situation. Now that mentality simply won't work in contemporary academia. One has to be willing to change. One has to be willing to look at things in new ways, even away from our comfort zones, because that was a nice thing about academia 20 years ago. Things remained constant, and you could do the things the way that your lectures did stuff. No longer the case.
Prof. Malibogo, you want to add something on the listening skills and the ability to really, pay the right attention to the mentee from a mentorship point of view?
Sure. I don't know that I have much wisdom on that score. But I think probably being able to put ourselves aside in that relationship. Obviously, the mentor has a wealth of experience, a wealth of perspectives that they've built up over time. But I think sometimes really being able to hear where someone is coming from, or to hear that, yes, the situation looks similar to something I've seen before, but perhaps the dynamics are completely different. And giving the advice lightly as well. I think something that's been very helpful is sometimes walking into mentoring relationships and being told explicitly, take me with a pinch of salt. Yes, I am your mentor here. And making that explicit has been really helpful when you're given advice and you can then say, actually, I find that difficult to take on board, or I find that difficult to work with because of the specific dynamics I'm in, and being able to receive that from a mentee has really been a big leveler, I think.
So what we're hearing is that the ability to move from an ego system to an ecosystem, that is what it is all about. It's not about your ego, it's how do we develop ecosystems. I think that makes perfect sense. Maybe I want to conclude our discussions, unless you want to still add something, just by sharing one anecdote, actually two. Since we are in the spirit of the World Cup netball and soccer, football, you've maybe some of you have seen how Australia have shocked the world by winning, the women's soccer team by winning Canada 4-0. It was quite an amazing win. But it always reminds me way back, and I'm a big sport fan, when the 2007 Springbok World Cup team, when they beat the All Blacks before the World Cup, Tana Umaga, the center of the All Blacks, stepped into the cloakroom of the Springboks and he asked them to close their eyes, which was for them very strange. And then he actually advised them to think about the person and actually make them to play rugby and make them to love the game. Who was the best role model influencing them? And then he said, please, tonight before you start to party and drink beer, you know how the Springboks are, please phone that person and thank him. So there's something of a role model, I'm hearing you, and sometimes I think also us that are more elder academics, we also have a huge responsibility in knowing, even in the unexpected places, our peers, but also our youngsters expect us to be, in a sense, their scholarly role models. And then the second comment I want to make is that, often you will hear academics are struggling to focus. They don't find enough time because they are bogged down with meetings, bureaucracies. And one of my peers actually gave me the advice as a peer mentor and said, Lucius, you need to adhere to the 6,600 rule. I said, what does it mean, Hussein? He said, no, every day, 5 days a week, you read 6,000 words. That's more or less a book chapter or an article. And you write 600 words. Because after a month, you can do the calculation. After 12 months, you'll have enough stuff to share and to publish. That was his advice as a peer to me. I want to thank you sincerely for your time, Prof. Norman, Prof. Irma, and Prof. Malebogo, for your time and your expert input. I think it's time that we move on with the program. I will be leaving my space if you just give us a few seconds for the new people to come and join. Thank you, Geer.
Thank you, Prof. Lucius, and to all the other professors. I tell you, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite clear that this relationship that we're talking about is a very precious one, but it's also a very sensitive one. And as I sit here and listen to the experts and giving their opinions and views and relating to their experiences, I keep on thinking, how do you manage this? How do you get into the complexity and deal with all the delicacies in that relationship and make it happen? Because you can't be too informal about it. You can't be too formal about it. You have to really just hit that sweet spot and get that relationship going. Well, I think that was what the people at Obtentia had in mind when they developed their short learning program. And they said, listen, let's tackle the complexity of mentoring. And let's put something on the table from both a mentorship and a mentee perspective and see what comes from it. And I'm very curious to hear what they have put on the table and what they are going to present to us. So again, if you listen to this and you want to know more, you're more than welcome to engage with us, ask a few questions, specifically now about the short learning program. But even if you don't want to ask questions now, go to Obtentia's website because you'll find all the information on what we're talking about there. Talking about Obtentia, ladies and gentlemen, the director of the Obtentia Research Unit, Professor Ian Rothman, has joined us, and to my right we also have Dr. Neil Barnard here today. So we'll be hearing from both of them. Prof. Ian, I think I'll give you the inside track and tell us a little bit more. Give us a little bit of a background about the course that you've developed.
Thank you very much, Geer. I want to share about the two courses for academic mentoring that we have developed in Obtentia. But I cannot take all the credits because I think my faculty really provided inputs there, colleagues that we interviewed, and then the team who worked on the development of these two courses. So important just from a definitional perspective is to note that we talk about mentorship, but there's also room for coaching within our mentorship definition. So where coaching is a non-directive learning conversation, mentorship is coaching, but also experience-based inputs, as you hear from some of the speakers previously. And it's about advice and it's about guidance. So why is academic mentoring so important? Because that was the starting point for the two courses that we developed. Firstly, it's because academic work is so complex. And if I never realized that, I realized that when we were developing the courses and the discussions we had with people. So they say that academic work has more than 100 functions. And as one of the participants put it, it's like navigating without having a map when you are an academic. We know that you need certain things to be successful as an academic, but unfortunately, that definition of what is success in academia is very much a difficult thing to discuss, and it's often contested. So younger academics especially, and sometimes older ones as well, need more insight and need opinions and need discussions about success in academic work and how we can define it and deal with it. Well-being is such an important part of an academic's whole makeup and your functioning. And we know from recent research that well-being has a significant impact on people's productivity. So much as 13%, some of the recent research showed us. And then Corey Keyes mentioned the approach that we often take to health care and well-being, and he says that we are in this reactive mode where we wait for people to break down and we park ambulances at the bottom of a cliff. He says that's because of two problematic assumptions. The one is, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So wait for the problem to occur. Secondly, if it breaks, we'll find a cure. Now, those two assumptions are not good if we consider well-being of academics. We want a proactive component where we focus on mattering of people. Every academic, every individual in life wants to matter, wants to be valued, but also want to feel that he or she is adding value. So for us, the focusing is on what makes people feel that they matter, what makes people feel that they can flourish in their work. And then something that was developed years ago, the concept of languishing, which is the opposite of flourishing, actually came from 2000 already when Professor Corey Keyes introduced the concept as the opposite of flourishing. But during the pandemic, one of the best-known work psychologists internationally, Adam Grant, wrote about his own experiences of languishing while he was at home. And he said, you know, he was not depressed, neither was he excited or had energy for anything. So languishing is that emptiness, that invisibility that you oftentimes feel. And you feel it because you feel that things that you value were taken away from you without your permission. And I think that's a very relevant kind of feeling that and state that we find in all people, but also specifically in academics. By the way, if you are languishing constantly, the chances are 8 times higher that you will end up with a mental illness within 10 years of time. So languishing is really something that we need to identify, we need to talk to people, we want to find out what is withholding, mattering, and flourishing. So why the courses in academic mentoring? Firstly, mentors are not psychologists. They are not trained for the role. Oftentimes they have no training. So mentoring can be for better or it can be for worse. It can be for worse in the sense that a vicious cycle can start if you talk to a mentor and that mentor doesn't understand or cannot help you. On the other hand, mentorship can be for better if a virtuous cycle is sort of unleashed. Secondly, training levels the playing field by providing everyone access to the same opportunities. As our DVC, Teaching and Learning, explained in his interview when we interviewed him, this whole idea that, you know, academia has become a complex space where people work. And, you know, oftentimes not all people have the same benefit of access to a good mentor. And we can help through training to mentees, but we can also help the mentors on the other hand. Training provides a minimum standard. It makes opportunities available. It reduces the complexity. Understanding academic world in a different light, maybe, knowing more about your capabilities, about your functioning. These are all things that can come from training programs. And then important, we know that it's not a cure for all kind of thing if people went through a short course in mentoring or for mentees. We teach or we try people, we facilitate people to learn things which they can then use to personalize interventions for their specific mentees. So that's really an important aspect to consider. So we have these 2 courses, and underlying these courses, I think it's Prof. Malebogo who referred to the values kind of thing. And, you know, as Sinek says, if you don't know why, you can't know how. And then Clark and Souza, 2018, said values can provide a deep rationale for academic work and self-expression. So an important path to success for academics is to focus on values. So we have the 2 courses, the short course for academic mentors, and then a course for the mentees. It consists, in my case, of the course that I developed for academic mentors of 5 study units. The first one dealing with the context in which people find themselves in, the academic environment, the broader environment, academic work, its challenges, values, and success. The second study unit focuses on capabilities and functionings of academics, and then also how you can move from languishing to flourishing and mattering. And the third one is about the necessities of academic mentoring. How do you select a mentor? Or what kind of ethics concerns do you need to consider? What kind of forms do you need to have when you are in academic mentorship kind of thing? So that's the necessities. And then fourthly, it's about engaging in conversations in such a way that it's for better and not for worse. And that means skills training of our mentors. And finally, is to put everything we have in a model of change management for a mentee. So those are the 5 study units that we have, and there I try to give an idea, a model of how these things link. So on the one hand, point number 1, you have the academic context. Point number 2, you have the capabilities, and these are individual contextual kind of interactions that occur. And within this, there are necessities of academic mentoring, the boundaries, the expectations, the setting up of the program, the different phases. It's not just only young academics. It's people who want to decide whether they should do a PhD. It's people who want to decide whether they should go for an NRF rating, or teaching and learning success, or dealing with different cultures. As an academic, not only in our country, you'll deal with very diverse people, but also on an international level, you need to work with diversity. And then we take it to mentoring for better or for worse. That's our conversation model, where we do things like attending. How do you attend, respond, personalize, and initiate? How do you withhold your advice and listen carefully to the mentee? And then study unit 5, as I said, talking about what is your vision, your ideal self, your real self, that's your strengths and your weaknesses, your learning agenda, the experimentation and practice, and then the resonant relationships and support that you need to put this change program into place. A word or two just about our method. This is an online course. It's self-directed learning consisting of 40 nodal hours, 4 Zoom sessions, and 1 personal contact session, specifically for interpersonal skills training, because that is something I believe that you cannot do that well just by using the internet, for instance, or Zoom sessions or whatever. And then we have the idea of compulsory material, but also recommended material. I mean, you need much more than 40 hours, but some things are compulsory things, some things are good to read, recommended readings, and so on. And then we use the three forms of engagement, learner-to-learning material, so it's reading the material, studying the material, and then learner-to-learner discussions with your co-learners, and then facilitator-to-learner learning. We have reading material on RISE, links in the library. We have now agreements with all three campuses of the Northwest University, where we have quite a bit of reading work available for everyone who's in these courses to read. And the wonderful thing is that sometimes, your mentor might not have that much time, but then you might still find some answers by just reading through your work or studying specific things that we prescribe within the course. Communication and discussions, we have the Ifundi kind of chat boxes, and there's messages and forums, there's Telegram and there's email that we can use there. And then the idea of assessment, we don't want to waste people's time, but we ask them from study unit 1 to build on assessments that can help with a final summative kind of assessment, which is then also used as a basis when you go into your mentorship program with your mentee. Now, we use free platforms, and this is actually wonderful. I must mention Lance Bunt. He's a graphics expert, he's a computer expert, but he's working closely with us, and he did all the online work for these two courses. And he used RISE Articulate, Ifundi, and then also Glide to develop the material and to put it online. So basically, you can have, through an app on your cell phone or on your iPad, your tablet, you will have information available via Glide. You can even access things like ChatGPT to learn more about mentorship. Wonderful also, I must mention the brilliance of the young people, is where we administer a certain questionnaire to people. We ask them questions, but then the computer, as they interact and they answer questions, the computer answers back. So it's like an interactive kind of exercise that we really built in, and that's the wonder of the young people with the technical skills, specifically Lance Bunt, brilliant guy. There's just how Glide looks. So that is what you can have on your cell phone or on your tablet, your iPad. You can have everything there. It also links to the website of the university, and then the two courses are available there. Obviously, currently we use passwords to access, because we cannot just distribute this to everyone. Now with that, I'm through. Thank you, Geerpeer.
Prof. Ian, we should have given you more time to tell us a little bit more about this. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful introduction to the academic mentorship short course. We now want to jump to academic mentees, Dr. Neil, the short course that we have on offer there, because we have to get both perspectives. Before you start, Dr. Neil, I'd just like to say, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to have them here for a few questions. We already have one. The obvious one is costs, the practicalities of how do you get into this, etc. So we're going to address that now. In the meantime, you're more than welcome to post your questions. We have Dr. Neil Barnard here. He's a postdoctoral research fellow. And although we have questions for him as to the rumor that postdoctoral research fellows only sleep 4 hours a day, we're not going to go into that. Please tell us a little bit more about the short course.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, so I was honored to be part of the short course in mentorship, and then especially in the course for mentees. So for early career and establishing academics like myself, we are thrown into the deep end of extreme knowledge work. So we are very, very optimistic at the start and very glad to be part of academia and the academic world until we get faced with some of these challenges, like teaching and learning, which is maybe something that we know we might do, but then we get overwhelmed. We start getting questions like, oh, are you applying for NRF rating, and how's it going with that rating? And you didn't even know about this NRF rating maybe at the start. There's other challenges coming up. You are starting to get frightened. Then you also get your research load on top of that. Then they tell, well, you also need to do your doctoral studies, and you also need to do community engagement. And then it's just an overwhelming sense of fear and anxiety that's maybe coming up. And then we saw, obviously, for people who's then entering into the world of academia, it can be very powerful and rewarding to then have a mentor that can guide you through this process. And I'm putting emphasis on guide. I think some of the previous speakers already placed emphasis on that, is that the mentor is there to guide you. So this course is then to give you some insights onto how you can prepare for such a mentorship relationship or mentorship partnership. So it's very important to understand that us as mentees in this process, we have a big responsibility in the success of such a relationship. So the short course for mentees, or for being a successful mentee, is made up of 4 study units. So essentially, just before I go into this, it will follow more or less the same approach as the short course in mentorship regarding the nodal hours, the approach to it, and everything as Prof. Ian discussed. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. I'm just going to dive into exactly it is what this program or short course is focused on. So the first study unit, the academic environment, is to give the mentee or the early academic some idea as to what it is, or what is academic work. What can you expect of being an academic, and what is some of the expectations. Also, some of the typical challenges that's encountered by academic workers. So first of all, so that you know you're maybe not alone in this, and to know that this is normal, but also to be on the lookout for these challenges, and then how a mentorship relationship or partnership can actually guide you in dealing with these challenges effectively. Then also choosing the right academic work. Sometimes we are bombarded with all of the academic work, and we need to select which is the right academic work, maybe for your success indicators or where you want to move to, but then also doing that work right. So this is a very important and valuable part that a mentorship can play here, is to guide you in selecting the right academic work, but then also actually doing it in the right way. Then study unit 2 focuses on capabilities and functionings of academic workers. So ideally, what is meant by capabilities? Why do we need capabilities? What is the importance of capabilities? And then why do we need to pay attention to this? So to not give too much away from what is in the actual program, I'm going to leave it there, but essentially it's about enabled and achieved work value. So a mentor can play a very crucial role in this, to identify your work values, or help you to define them maybe, and how you can actually be enabled to achieve them. Also focusing on the functioning of academic workers, so to make sure that our well-being is in check while we navigate the world of academia, to flourish in this environment, and then obviously to lessen the symptoms, at least, of burnout. I've heard earlier that sometimes just not burning out is also a success indicator in academia sometimes. Then also, what are some of the factors affecting capabilities and functioning of academics or academic workers, such as job demands and job resources? So this will typically be what the mentee is exposed to in study unit 2. Then if we move on to study unit 3, now being a mentee. So how do you prepare for such a mentorship relationship? As we said, there's a lot of responsibilities on the mentee to make this relationship and partnership work. And this study unit will focus on how do you prepare for such a relationship. Some of the things that you'll focus on is guidelines to set up a mentorship relationship in the sense of matching. How do you set up an agreement? What do you do in the first session? And then obviously, when or how do you end such a partnership or such a relationship? Then also mentoring at transition points. So for example, if you're entering doctoral studies, how can you benefit from a mentorship partnership in that? Or when you're busy with a postdoc, as I am currently, and I can see the value of having a mentor in that. And then obviously maybe just generally early researchers or early academics in terms of teaching and learning, community engagement, and how do you transition to that. Then there's also a focus on mentoring for skills development in the sense of how do we do this networking that was also discussed earlier by some of our esteemed keynote speakers, grant success as well, and then obviously publications, so specific skills that you need as an academic worker. Then the last study unit is being a mentee in the sense of towards a personal model of intentional change. So in this partnership, in this mentoring relationship, ideally there needs to be change. So this is then a model on how you can approach this change. So we make use there of Piazza's model of change, awakening the desire to change, so some guidelines on that. How do you survive and thrive? The power of having a personal vision. Then obviously cultivating a resonant relationship in this partnership. What is the power of vulnerability? That is quite an interesting part. And then becoming an academic leader. So how do you transition from where you are at the moment and actually being an influential or leader in academia? And that is in short what the mentees can expect from this short course.
Dr. Neil, I find this one really fascinating because I think when you talk about mentorship, you tend to think about, the mentorship and not the mentee necessarily. You start with the mentor role. So this is fascinating. We've had a few questions here that before we let you go, first want to direct to you. And the first one is, I want you to expand a little bit on this mentoring at transition points that you've mentioned. We've also had a comment about the post-grad environment where a conversation between a supervisor and a postgraduate student, that conversation also having something pertaining to as what we've spoken about now. I think just talk a little bit about it's transitioning points you mentioned.
Correct. So so the transition points, that's very important. So ideally what we want in this program is to prepare mentees for this relationship. So we say, well, you need to go and do some self-finding at least. You say, what is your success indicator in academia? So then in that there will be different transition points. Maybe, for example, someone who needs to go into doctoral studies, they would say, well, this is the next step that I need in my academic career, and they then use a mentor specifically to go through that process. Or for the example where I am now is a postdoctoral studies and having a mentor in this transition point. So transitioning maybe from different phases or different success indicators in your academic career.
There's quite often a bit of play going on in that conversation. I mean, I'm saying play, but I mean an exploration of ideas. Reaching out where two minds or more meet and have meaningful conversations. I suppose this will help within that space as well.
Correct, definitely. So this is what we are also saying is that we need to understand that this mentorship relationship or partnership is a conversation. So it cannot just be where a mentor pitches up and say, well, you know what, I want to do my doctoral studies next. Okay, mentor, please give me some advice on this. And then just hoping that there is advice that's being given will automatically ready me for the next phase. So that's in having a discussion, going out, trying to apply what was discussed or the advice what was given, going back to the mentor, continuing then with that discussion. You say, well, this worked, this maybe didn't work, or I need to explore more on this. And that is absolutely correct.
Dr. Neil, thank you for your time. We're going to have you go do whatever you need to do when evening strikes and the computer is switched on and so on. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Prof. Ian, we had a question here on whether or not someone should do both short courses, whether it's advisable to only do one or to do both. That's one part of it. And the other question was, if the mentee does one course and you already have a mentor, is it then ideal that the mentor should do the mentorship course as well?
Our idea is that, if possible, we want to prepare people for a mentorship relationship. So if we can prepare the mentor, and the mentor knows with which, let's say, mentee he or she will work, then it's great if the mentor goes through the one course and the mentee goes through the other course. But it's not necessary, essential to do that. What we want to do is prepare people in broad for the mentorship role, and they need to be flexible to apply what they have learned there and what they know from other sources, to apply that in a relationship with a mentee. The ideal would be that you do the course what you need at this stage. So what we decided in our faculty is that we are encouraging mentors before they get involved in a mentorship relationship to do the mentorship course. That's fundamental, that's needed. And the same with mentees, so that you don't waste each other's time, that you can prepare properly for the relationships. But no, mentees might do the mentee course, and the mentor will be a total different kind of person. Doesn't need to be matched at that stage already, but they will learn how they can match the best with a mentee or whatever. So that's what I can say. I hope that makes sense.
And on a more practical level, once we start talking about the course and so on, how does it work? Are there admission requirements? How do you register, costs and so on?
Typically, we want people who have a master's degree at least. We want them to participate in the program as mentees. Obviously, for a mentor, you will need a PhD before you can become a mentor. In terms of the costs, we want this to be an opportunity for people to use and to make it available. So that is something that we're still discussing within the faculty, how we want to deal with the issue. But within our faculty, at least, the idea is to make it available as a resource to our mentors and mentees.
That's wonderful, because it becomes, I don't want to call it just an HR tool, but it becomes a tool within your toolkit, within organizational leadership and development and so on.
Exactly, and we don't want to sort of go too much into that idea that you should be, you should pay for anything that you get that's relevant. We want people to develop the intrinsic motivation to do the course because they really want to make a difference. And that's how we define an academic, and that's why academic citizenship is also for us so important. Because as an academic, one of the things that you need to have as a value is to make a difference to somebody else, to the world, or whatever. And that is what we want to promote. And we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by bringing in all kinds of check and balances. You can only do this if you do that or whatever. But people have different opinions about this, and we're still discussing how we want to implement the whole payment thing.
These courses, have they been developed already? They're ready to go?
So they are online, GP. Both courses are online. They are ready to be presented. And then both of them, we are just waiting for the final registration process, the approval for short courses at the NWU. Hopefully that will all go well. We consulted with the various people, and it's already partly through the process. So we're just waiting for the final there.
Professor, and is this now only for the Faculty of Humanities?
No, some here and there, a bit of the material we contextualize very much to our faculty as well, because that's one thing we believe. You cannot take a mentoring course from elsewhere, people who do not know academia. You have to know academia. I mean, I'm in academia for 40 years of my life. So that's why I feel I can make a difference in terms of how an academic thinks and feels. And that's what I can say.
All right, so it'll be available across all faculties. That's what it comes down to. And it's not just a Northwest University thing, or is it an exclusive product?
No, I think any university, any higher education institution can benefit from something like academic mentoring. Definitely not for our faculty, but what my point that I forgot a little bit to make is that we'll sort of tailor a bit of the material, because it's important for us that the dean and the deputy deans talk to their people within the faculty. And obviously, deans and deputy deans differ over faculty. So we want to bring that message in to involve our leaders within the faculties in the discussion about mentorship as well.
I just think in your mode of delivery, you've covered a lot of bases. I mean, it's an online thing, the student to content relationship, but also the peer-to-peer, the student. Those conversations are also, very organic, and it accommodates different views. And then, of course, the physical sessions, the in-person sessions that you have planned as well. It all leads to that where you can be a bit more explorative.
Exactly.
All right. So what do we need to look out for in terms of when things will be ready? Shall we follow you on social media and wait for a big announcement?
Obviously, you can talk to, if you're in our faculty, you can talk to our deputy deans or the dean, or the school directors. The information will be there. But it's also on the Optentia website. I guess it will also be available on the university website for short courses soonly after we have registered them. So you can go to the landing page of the Optentia website, and there you will find lots of information about the short courses.
I'm sorry to pepper you with questions, but I have a few. And you're not worried about numbers? You're not going to only take in 20 at first and see how it goes, or is it open?
We don't think we will have that many. We'll see what will happen. But for now, we are worried about numbers in a certain sense. But remember, it's a self-learning material that we have there. And we bring in facilitators and train them, if necessary, to help out. But for now, it was not our biggest worry. It was to complete the course and to make it ready for the first presentation, probably with around 20 mentees, 20 mentors in a group, something like that.
All right. So I'm all excited about this. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure you are too. And perhaps a year from now, we look back at the rolling out of this, and hopefully with a lot of success. Thank you for putting this on the table, Professor, from Optentia's side. Really appreciative for the work that you've done. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a few minutes left. I'm not going to let the Professor go. If you still need your questions in, we are here to answer them. So please, just post away. Now, I've been joined by Professor Myrna Nel. She's the Deputy Dean, Research and Innovation within the Faculty of Humanities at the Northwest University. It's nice to have you here, Professor. Thank you for joining us. It's a lot of excitement about these short courses. It looks as if they are both quite valuable.
Very much so, Geerpier. So when I was appointed in this position just less than 4 years ago, one of our first priorities when we did a strategic planning was the mentorship program. And of course, lots of things happened in between, COVID and all those kinds of things. But I knew that the mentorship program where I wanted to go was to Optentia. I knew that the expertise and the knowledge was there. And when we started with this program, and that is when I listened to the wonderful keynotes that we had, a lot of the issues that they have mentioned, we knew that it needed to be addressed in our mentorship program, that it should not just be career advice, how to publish, where to publish, how to get an NRF rating, that it is about the person also. And the wonderful thing that Ian immediately mentioned when we started talking about this mentorship program was the whole issue of mattering. I think that is something, especially in our world today, is that we want to feel that we matter. And the academic world can be very lonely, you know, and there's many times that we feel we don't matter because we don't achieve, you know, we don't have enough outputs, or teaching and learning is not successful, all those kind of negative things that happen. And that the mattering and the well-being and the flourishing was a very, very big goal for us in this mentorship program. And as if you've seen, I have been updated throughout the development of this program, and every time I got more and more excited about the quality and that was put into this program. So of course, yes, Geerpie, very excited about this, and I am looking so much forward to put it into implement it in the faculty. So you have been asking about the planning and how we're going to do that. So for the faculty, we will definitely have a formal process to implement it, and we need to discuss that with our faculty management committee how to do that. So there's a discussion about, do we force everyone to do this, which we don't really want to do, but I think if everyone looks at this program, we will want to do this. Yeah, so Geerpie, allow me also just to, you know, refer back to the keynotes and just highlight a few issues that I'm so glad that they mentioned. And maybe if I can start with Prof. Irma Elof, I see she's still online. You know, we talked about that informal mentoring that happens in a few seconds at a conference or in the corridors or with a coffee machine, and which is also so important. So Prof. Irma, even, I've told her the last time I saw her, we've met very few times. But in my field, she has always been a mentor without even knowing it, Irma, you know, through the work that she has done. So mentoring even happens without really knowing someone. So thank you for that, Prof. Irma. And that is really something that is very important to me, that we acknowledge and that we take in whenever we meet someone. And that places a responsibility on us as senior people, you know, when we mentor around the coffee machine in the corridors and at conferences or even at faculty meetings or faculty events, that when someone just steps up to you and quickly asks a question, that is part of your responsibility. But one thing that I need to warn, it's something that I've learned throughout my career, is that we should not preach. You know, we talk a lot about advice and guidance, but that is something that Prof. Norman, I had to unlearn, is to preach. Because we have so much knowledge and expertise there that you want to share it so much and that you actually then preach. So that is just something that I want to mention. And I think the one last thing before I do the thank yous also is the one thing or the key principle that I've learned about mentorship. And Ian talked, you know, about academic citizenship actually making a difference. And someone very wise said some time ago that the greatest achievement of a mentor is when the mentee surpasses your achievements. That's your legacy. So I hope that this program can provide that kind of opportunity.
I've personally been hit by this, the Mentee short course. I think that's. I mean, they are both brilliant, but it's just, you know, you tend to think, all right, you know, how do you lead? How do you go forward? Yeah. But you also have to think, how do I follow? How do I position myself?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Geerpie, so that is also when we started the mentorship program, we identified that there are certain different categories of people who can mentor and mentee. And of course, the young academics just starting an academic career, and then especially, and Neil referred to it, when you just got your PhD, you know, except for the emotional exhaustion that happens after a PhD, that uncertainty, where do I go now? So that was the important phase for us. And then, of course, you know, those academics who's emerging in their careers, we're still very uncertain of a lot of things. And then even if you're an established academic, the peer mentoring there is such an important issue. So yes, it's not just about, you know, that young, scared, uncertain academic. I think throughout, even if you have been 40 years in academics, there's always uncertainty and fear.
Yeah. All right, Professor, you said you had a few thank yous.
Yes, so GP, of course. Let me start by our executive, well, maybe first with the keynotes. I think we had, and it's so nice, Prof. Maliboge, that you are here from Cape Town and have been traveling all across Europe. Thank you very much for being here and making all the trouble to be here, and of course sharing so much important notes for us, especially about us. I'm so happy that you mentioned the whole interdisciplinary mentoring that happens, and that you mentioned also that humanities played a very big role in that, Prof. Maliboge. So thank you for that. And of course, Prof. Irma, the whole issue about being true to ourselves, I think that is a critical thing that we need to remember in an academic career, because we are so overwhelmed with many things and pressures in the academics that we sometimes lose ourselves. And Prof. Norman, this whole principle of learning, continuously learning, unlearning, relearning is sometimes that we forget to do because we get so stuck in the things that we are expected to do that we forget to do that. So thank you very much for these great keynotes that we had. And then, of course, our executive team, Prof. Dumi Moyo, you know, that is the one great thing of our executive team. When we embark on a project, he just says, how can I support you? So his support in this whole process was absolutely great. And, of course, the whole faculty, everyone in the faculty. But especially, as I mentioned earlier, you know, when I had the responsibility to choose who to help me put this mentorship program in place, I knew that I had to go to Optentia. So Prof. Jan and his whole team, the whole Optentia team, Neil, who worked very hard in developing the program, Anjunet for all the hard work in coordinating, putting everything into place, and Lynn for organizing all the practicalities, always doing it very well. Thank you so much. I don't think you know how much you mean for the faculty and how much change and difference you make in the faculty. And not just for the faculty, but actually for the university. So, Gepe, forgive me if I get a bit emotional here, but I am so excited about this mentorship program. I really believe that it's going to make a difference.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor. It's wonderful to have you here as well. And thank you to you, Prof. Madnan Nel, the Deputy Dean, Research and Innovation in the Faculty of Humanities. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any more questions, reach us. Reach out to Optentia because they'll be the shortest route to getting more information on these two short learning programs that have been put in place. Have a look out on at their website. Follow them, see what they communicate, and the news will break and you'll be the one receiving it. Stop languishing. It's over now. It's time for you to register for those two short courses. I hope you have a wonderful day and thank you for joining us here.